Video games are a common medium today. Everybody knows what a video game is. Kids, parents, hell even dementia-filled grandma knows what a video game is. Now that wasn't always the case. Video games used to be a very unknown medium. When the first game console was released, the term video game wasn't even a thing yet. The companies making these new products didn't even know what they were making most of the time. That was very prominently shown through the game commercials at the time, which would primarily explain to you what that damn thing was.
Families who are content to let television do its thing often find themselves at its mercy for a choice of entertainment, while people who want television to do their thing entertain themselves with Odyssey, the electronic game of the future, and the family's best foul-weather friend.
This all changed when the Atari 2600 released. Suddenly, video games had a term for them, and were somewhat mainstream. Still didn't help the commercials though.
I'll blow this town to smithereens! Time bomb! Try to get up there in time, Spider-Man!
Watch me cut my web, Goblin!
Watch yourself fall, Silk Slinger!
Gotta stop the bombs in time!
If I don't get you, webhead, my diagnosis will!
Holy Hannah!
And you're running out of fluid!
Is this more action than even Spider-Man could handle?
Spider-Man, a video game from Parker Brothers, the ones to beat.
What the hell was that? However, there were more commercials that did get people to buy the games. Just don't really know how.
The fun is back! Oh yes, siree! It's the 2600 from Atari. It's the video system with classics galore, from Space Invaders to cars that roar. A real hip joystick controls the screen. Solaris is hot and Midnight Magic's mean. And one more thing, it's got a special low price, under 50 bucks. 50 bucks? Now isn't that nice? The fun is back! Oh yes, siree! It's the 2600 from Atari.
So video games were better than ever before, mainly because there was barely any before it. There was an issue, however. As a matter of fact, there were multiple. The main one being that the games that were being released were all just really bad. So with the release of the infamously bad E.T. the video game, there was the video game crash of 1983. This pretty much made the stock market for video games completely flop on its face. Nobody wanted these pieces of junk anymore. In fact, most excess copies were thrown in landfills. Video games had effectively died out after what was presumed to be the golden age of video games at the time. To most, video games were a passing fad, nothing more. That is, until the Nintendo Entertainment System released in 1985. The NES had completely revived video games. Well, in America, at least. The video game crash of 1983 had mainly only really happened in the US. In Japan, video games were still fine for the most part. There was a little bit of a market crash over there, but in Japan it was called the Atari shock and only really happened for a small amount of time, and not nearly as bad as it was in the US, thanks in part to the Famicom. The Japanese version of the NES, which was released over there in 1983, the year of the crash. But since the crash was so bad over here in America, Nintendo, the company that made the Famicom, were reluctant to release the console over here. What if it failed like the Atari 2600? Nintendo at this time was not nearly as successful as they soon would become, and they couldn't take this risk. So they went to the drawing boards to try and make it more American consumer friendly. Then they ended up making a grand black box. When they initially released the console in the US, they were only really testing to see how the console would sell over here. But thanks to a specific game that came packaged with the console, it blew up. The game in question being Duck Hunt. You got to shoot ducks with a toy gun. It was great.
Which will score more points? Eagle's new nacho cheese tortilla chips or the other leading brand? Jack? You're not paying attention to me, Jack. Now you have to try the other leading brand. Jack, I know you like Eagles better, but you have to try them both, you geek. Will you pay attention to me? Don't let this happen to you. New Eagle nacho cheese. You're gonna love them.
No, the actual game in question was Super Mario Bros. Obviously. With how simple the game was, people weren't confused with what to do, unlike in the past with these controllers. The game was an absolute hit, to say the least. Everybody wanted a Nintendo Entertainment System for Mario, so they could play the new Mario game. Mario single-handedly saved the video game industry altogether. There is a reason people call a video game a Nintendo. Video games would not be what they are today without Super Mario Bros. Without this game, video games today might not have even existed. That is a pretty impressive feat, all things considered. This game must be absolutely incredible if that's the case. Well, I'll be taking a look at Super Mario Bros. Today to see if the game actually holds up at all today. This is Super Mario Bros. I don't really think I need to explain much about how the game itself works. That doesn't mean I won't, but you know. You run, you jump, you kill, you go through world by world until you make it to the 8th and beat the game. It's very simple, which made it a great pick up and play kind of game. And it made the game very consumer friendly, which at the time was the perfect strategy for making a video game work. And that same idea still permeates on modern video games. Companies want their games to be as consumer friendly as possible, whereas before Super Mario Bros., it more so felt like a company wanted their game's box art to look as appealing as possible and nothing more. Super Mario Bros. Was a very consumer friendly game, which was refreshing coming from these absolutely not consumer friendly games. The consumers of the product took priority, rather than the box art of the game. In fact, the game's box art was a perfect example of this. It's very basic and shows what you're gonna be getting from the game. Kind of. So it shows you what you're visually going to be getting, but nothing else. You cannot tell me you fully know what's happening in this, and much less explain to me why they made Mario die in lava as the game's box art. The lines behind them are also pretty odd additions to it as well. Other than the weird as hell box art, the important thing was that the box art showed you exactly what the game was about, visually. Many games before it would simply make a nice looking box art and not show you any of what the game was about. It's also good to note that this box art was only in America. In Japan, they got this. Much better than just seeing Mario seconds before he dies in lava, yet somehow the box art made people want to buy the game. It was definitely because it showed you how the game would look, which was pretty good at this time. I mean, at least the back shows some of the best screenshots from the game. But before we get to the game, let's talk about a few of the extra things first, because I don't know when else to talk about them. First thing of note is the time limit. It's a time limit. However, this time limit doesn't go down in normal seconds. It goes down in what I'll call Mario seconds. It's just a really fast timer, isn't it? When it hits 0, you die. It is a limit of time. This was here to make sure people didn't take forever to beat the levels. When it hits 100 Mario seconds left, it quickens the music and makes the situation very urgent. The next thing to talk about is the points that you gain in the game. Points in video games have kind of gone away in modern times. Mainly because we don't play arcade games nearly as much anymore. We don't care if we get a high score anymore, other than for certain games. In this game, you earn points by doing things in the game. Killing an enemy, collecting an item, collecting coins. All of these things can give you points. While we're on the subject, let's talk about coins. The coins in this game are the only real thing to collect in it. they're only really there for another way to get a 1-up. Once you get 100 coins, the game gives you a 1-up. I'll talk about 1-ups later, but for now, coins are useful and also fun to collect. The noise it makes when you get one is really nice. That and the fact that they give you a 1-up make collecting coins fun. The game itself is, well, Super Mario Brothers. Don't really know how else to describe it. As I have said, you run, you jump, and you kill. However, there are issues, as older games tend to have. For one, Mario didn't really have an identity at this point, which means the game doesn't have very much character to it. The only visual distinction the game really has is its mushroom aesthetic, which I love, obviously. But other than that, there's really no distinction to the different worlds in the game. They're all just blockland again and again. Even when the environment does change, it's usually very minuscule things, like the color of the pipes and trees, or it's nighttime now. Not much, other than the levels that take place on mushrooms or in the sky. Visually, they are the best part. There are underground and water levels as well, but they're also very forgettable visually, and not very visually interesting at all. The game doesn't really stand out visually is what I'm saying. The music doesn't really help the game stand out either, considering there's only really 6 tracks in the entire thing. Those are the overworld theme, the underground theme, the underwater theme, the castle theme, the superstar theme, and the end theme. Everything else is just quick inversions of the originals or small snippets of music. It's not really much to write home about and gets kind of really repetitive throughout the game. The game also doesn't have the best physics due to being one of the first games with much physics at all. However, it is still an issue. I died way too much due to the slippery kind of controls. I say kind of because they aren't really slippery, but Mario in this game just doesn't stop walking when you let go of the button. Just a bit of input lag on Mario's running, I guess. It just gets really annoying when you die to it a lot more than you should. That also reminds me, the levels in the game. I've already talked about how they aren't visually interesting at all, except maybe like 2. However, I haven't talked about the level designs. That's mainly because they're just fine, nothing crazy spectacular. They're just fine. There are 4 different types of levels. The overworld levels, which are your basic levels that are everywhere. Then there's the underground levels, which are pretty much the overworld levels, but under the ground, and they should have totally been used more. It is a nice change of scenery, and it sucks that there are only like 2. Then there's the underwater levels, which just suck. They are both awful levels. They're just a slog to go through. Also, yes, there are only 2 of them as well. Then there are the castle levels, which are always at the end of any given world and nowhere else. They also have this really stupid gimmick later on, where you have to guess the right path, and if you don't, you have to restart that section of the level and guess again. The castle levels are fun until they throw this at you. There also could be considered a 5th type of level, those being the sky levels. They're just levels without a floor. These levels are also probably the most creative levels in the entire game, both visually and design-wise. They also have pretty cool ideas. There's one of these levels that just has Cheep Cheeps flying through the air at you, and it's very weirdly enjoyable to play through. And these seesaws. They never appear anywhere else but these levels. These are probably the best levels in the game, which sucks because they don't last very long. Now I'm going to list a few levels that I found interesting and fun to play through. 1-1. I feel like it goes without saying, really. It's iconic for a reason. It made the game a hit for a reason. It has some of the most consumer-friendly level design in it. It wasn't too hard for people to play and introduced the enemies in a slow and organized fashion. It helped people understand the game immediately. 1-2. It's the first underground level, and it made the underground levels absolutely infamous. This level is easily one of the best basic level designs in the entire game. It's still not too challenging, and it still tries to rope the player into playing the rest of the game, still slowly putting mechanics in your face and still making it fun despite the new mechanics, since they couldn't just put a tutorial screen in front of your screen to tell you everything. Also, the warp pipes make this level one of the most played and most memorable levels in the game. 2-3. It's one of the Cheep Cheep levels I talked about earlier. Same as earlier, they're just weirdly enjoyable, and it's really fun to book it through the level as the Cheep Cheeps are just flying behind you. 3-2. This level really has nothing to it. You just run through a barren level with barely any enemies or obstacles, but it's fun. 3-3. This level takes place in the sky, and it makes it a really fun level. The platforms that go left to right are fun, the seesaw things are fun to go on. It's pretty simple, great level. 4-1, it's one of the only levels with Lakitu, and that makes me sad. Lakitu's levels are great and fun, since you have to avoid the spiny eggs, and it's kind of like Cheep Cheep levels. I can't entirely put my finger on why these two levels are so fun to me, but they are. 4-2, this is another underground level, and it ups the difficulty a bit, showcasing this very well with the first jump of the level being a very difficult pit. This level is really fun and has 2 secret warp pipe areas to it. One in the same place as the one in 1-2, and one inside a block that you have to hit. And it leads you to this really cool looking area. I really wish they had made these mushrooms just in the normal levels. It would have made the game so much more distinct and fun. 4-3. This level has the mushroom platforms I was just talking about, except these ones are in the sky. This change of aesthetic is a really nice change. It makes this level one of my favorites, especially since it's in the sky and not on the ground. Although I do wish the land levels had these platforms in them, just like in the warp zone. I feel like it would have made the normal levels so much funner. 5-3. This level has bullet bills flying at you. It makes it interesting and fun. That's really all for this level. It's just a plain fun level. 6-1. This is the second and last level with Lakitu, very sadly. It's a night level as well. 6-3. This level doesn't really stand out. It wasn't even a crazy fun level. I just put it here since the entire thing is pale white. You might need a doctor, you know. 7-1. This is a pretty basic level, but it's fun. There are a lot of bullet bills flying at you. That's it. 7-3. This is also the second Cheep Cheep level, but this time it's a lot more interesting and fun since it's later on in the game. 8-1 through 8-3. Almost all of the levels in the 8th world are very fun and challenging specifically. The game isn't that challenging up until this point, but these levels are definitely much more challenging. It makes these levels stand out compared to every other level in the game. 8-4. I separated this level from the rest of World 8 levels since this level is crazy unique. It has the splitting pathways mechanic that I despise, but this level does so much better than any before. You have to go in these pipes to make it to the end, and each pipe you go into is different. There's not one way to beat this level. The first time I played this level, I didn't even know there was an underwater section to it. It is actually really cool that there are multiple ways to beat this level, especially at the time. It's probably the best level in the game. It really is that good. While all of these are really good levels sometimes, they still aren't much to write home about. Most of them are just plain fun with nothing really to them. Now here's a list of the worst levels in the game. Don't worry, there's not too many. 2-2. This is an underwater level, which means it's slow, boring, and annoying to play through. So much so that I don't really want to talk about how bad it is because it's very self-explanatory. 5-2. This level is bad for one reason and one reason only: the Hammer Brothers. I'll get to why they're the bane of my existence later. For right now, all you need to know is that they make this level one of the most annoying to play through. I actually really enjoy it though, unlike the rest of the levels on this worst levels list. I had a lot more fun with this level than any of the others. I still wouldn't consider it a great level though. It has this jump in it. It's such a basic jump, but it is such a pain to pull off. I'm surprised I made it first try while recording the footage. 7-2. Also, both underwater levels have the exact same layout with just more enemies added. 7-4. This is one of the castle levels, and this is where the splitting pathways mechanic becomes really damn annoying. It just takes way too long to find the right path that the timer would sometimes run out on me while I was trying to figure it out. The castle levels were fine before this. I really don't know why they had to ruin them with this one specifically. Other than those 4, there really aren't that many bad levels in this game. It is a good game after all. The levels are just mainly mediocre throughout the entire game, with not many interesting levels in it. While we're on the topic of levels, let's talk about one of the most memorable things in the game, the warp pipes. I don't really know where I stand with the warp pipes in this game. On one hand, they're great for speedrunning and make the game much funner to beat at a much quicker pace. However, this means that you skip like all of the game, and in the end you're just beating like 2 worlds worth of levels. It's fun to play through it this way, don't get me wrong, but they definitely didn't handle it very well. Specifically because the pipe that sends you furthest in the game ends up taking you to another warp pipe area, and then you can just beat the game from that. I feel like they could have done this better if they made the first warp pipe area the same, but put the second warp pipe area in like world 3, just so you can't go to the last pipe and then immediately make it to the end of the game with no real thought behind it. They could even still keep the second warp pipe area in the 4th world, with 1 in the 3rd, except the warp pipe in area 4 would only send you to world 5 and that's it, whereas the one in world 3 would send you to the 8th world. It would have probably added extra replayability to the game, even though that wasn't a priority at all back in the day. It would have made the game a lot more interesting and could get more people talking about it. It just feels like the warp pipes could have been done a lot better. Either way, people know about the warp pipes. It's the most memorable part of the game for a reason. Everybody knows about it, so they obviously did something right with them. Okay, let's talk about the enemies that inhabit these levels now, which either make these levels incredibly fun or abhorrently awful. After all, the enemies are the only things stopping you from beating the game with ease. Little Goomba, as the manual states. Goombas just walk around. They can hurt you if you touch them, but they really aren't difficult to avoid or stomp on. And apparently Goombas used to be mushrooms, but they betrayed the Mushroom Kingdom. Goombas have lore. Next up are the Koopa Troopas and the Paratroopas. They come in red and green. The green ones don't stop no matter what, and the red ones stop at an edge. Pretty simple red light, green light shtick. Spinies can't be stomped on, but other than that, they are just like Goombas. Piranha plants come out of pipes and bite you if you touch them. Although if you stand next to the pipe, they don't come out for some reason. Cheep Cheeps are fish, and bloopers are the bane of my existence. They are always on the same level as you in the underwater levels, and it's awful. They are easily the reason I hate the underwater levels so much. They are that bad. Bullet bills fly across the screen or are shot out of cannons. Lakitu throws spiny eggs at you. Potaboo, that's his name, is just a fireball. Excuse me, he is the protector of the great sorcerer Koopa King. Then there's Bowser, king of the Koopas, and the main antagonist of the game. Then there are the Hammer Brothers. In this game specifically, the Hammer Brothers are the biggest pain to deal with, since they jump in inconspicuous patterns, and by patterns, I mean random movement. And do not, I repeat, do not try to jump over these guys when they are throwing their hammers. You will die, which is a real pain to try and do when the game practically forces you to jump over them. They aren't very hard to deal with in future games, but in this game, you better book it as soon as you see them. Then there's the Buzzy Beetles, who cannot be killed with the Fire Flower. They can only be stomped on. Oh wait, I forgot about the power-ups! So the power-ups are mainstays in Mario games. There are a plentiful amount of power-ups with very unique upgrades to all of them, which makes it kind of surprising that the first game only has like 3 or 4. There is the Magic Mushroom, more so known as the Super Mushroom. This power-up makes Mario grow and lets you take a hit from enemies. Then there is the Fire Flower. This power-up lets Mario shoot fire. Somehow. Must hurt. Also, if you get hit with the Fire Flower power-up, you revert to Midget Mario again. If you try to collect the Fire Flower power-up. Without the super mushroom, you don't get the fire flower power-up. You just get the super mushroom. It doesn't make any sense, but whatever. Then there's the 1-up mushroom. This power-up gives you a life. It's not really a power-up per se. That also reminds me, the life system is a thing in this game. So basically, you start out the game with 3 lives, and from there, whenever you die, you lose a life. If you lose all your lives, you get a game over and have to restart the game all over. The life system isn't great, even back then, which the developers must have known, since if you hold A on the title screen, after you lost all your lives in the world, it sends you to the beginning of the world you just died on. So why have it in the first place? The life system worked on arcades because they were meant to steal your quarters. You don't spend quarters whenever you play Mario Bros. Though. So why? There is one last power-up still, that being the Starman power-up, also known as the Superstar. This makes Mario invincible for a short period of time. Now this may be a very short list of power-ups, but this was the best way something like this could have been handled. In a time where video games were not trusted, having power-ups to help you get through levels was the best idea, but adding too many power-ups would complicate things too much and go over the consumer's head. So still making power-ups would be better, but limiting the selection would make it more consumer friendly, which again was the key to success at the time. If the game overcomplicated things, it probably wouldn't have sold nearly as much as it did, and leave the video game industry in shambles. This logic can also be brought to the enemies and characters of the game. They're all simple, but add a sort of depth to the game that no other game before it did. Look at the main characters, for example. First, there's of course Mario and Luigi, although Luigi in this game is literally just player 2. The characters have names, which, yes, while is very simple, it adds a lot to the characters. Beforehand, we had nameless nobodies as our main protagonists, with them mainly just being blobs or eyeballs. Just eyeballs. The fact that they actually have names makes them much more meaningful. Like, you're not just a man running around killing, you're Mario running around killing. Then we have the mushroom retainers. I'm just gonna call them toads. They're toads. They live in the Mushroom Kingdom. They, again, add much more depth than was there before. These are the people of this new world that you're trying to save. They aren't just random mushroom people. You are saving them and their world. Then finally there's Princess Toadstool, who is just a question mark in the manual. She's the princess of the Mushroom Kingdom. In fact, she is the key to saving the Mushroom Kingdom, which you are, again, saving. I don't really feel like repeating myself again. There is one more character here, and that character is the jumping board. Mario jumps on it. It really is the most fleshed out character in the game, truly. I don't really know why the jumping board is in the characters section of the manual, but okay, sure. Hell, even the antagonist gives you reason to beat the game. King Koopa, Bowser, use magic to pretty much enslave all of the mushroom people and turn them into blocks, and since Princess Toadstool is the key to saving them, he captured her and locked her up. He is a literal menace to society. Their society. Oh yeah, this also reminds me, there's a story to this game. It's a pretty basic one, but having one at all was, again, new at the time. The story goes that, one day the kingdom of the peaceful mushroom people was invaded by the Koopa, a tribe of turtles famous for their black magic. The quiet, peace-loving mushroom people were turned into mere stones, bricks, and even field horsehair plants, and the Mushroom Kingdom fell into ruin. The only one who can undo the magic spell on the mushroom people and return them to their normal selves is the Princess Toadstool, the daughter of the Mushroom King. Unfortunately, she is presently in the hands of the great Koopa Turtle King. Mario, the hero of the story, maybe hears about the mushroom people's plight and sets out on a quest to free the Mushroom Princess from the evil Koopa and restore the fallen kingdom of the mushroom people. You are Mario. It's up to you to save the mushroom people from the black magic of the Koopa. Pretty basic, as I said, go save the princess, and that's the only real goal. However, the story gives background and reason on why you want to save the princess, so that you can save the entire Mushroom Kingdom. Also stating how you are Mario insinuates that reasoning. It's not much, but it's enough to make people even just slightly care about what's happening in the game. And that's pretty much what this entire game is. Not much, but enough. That's pretty much the game. It's pretty unremarkable if you've played any new game or any game after it. But this isn't how the game was supposed to be viewed. The game should be viewed through its time. This game was made when side-scrolling games weren't even a thing yet. So thinking of the game back then gives a good perspective to it, whereas if you think of the game in a modern lens, it will be very dated to you. But if you play it through a lens of the time, you'll be left with a much better experience. Now, am I saying to play through the game on the original NES with the box and manual in your hands? No, just no. I'm just saying to think of the gameplay as it was at the time. Innovative, new, and fun. I'd also recommend just not playing the game in general. That also works out probably for the better too. There are thousands upon millions of games. Why would you waste your time playing subpar ones? Go play Hollow Knight, or Bug Fables, or Pizza Tower, or Dead Cells. That's why I'm making this video, because I definitely played through all of those games plenty of times before. Damn, I should probably get to that. So while this game was ingenious at the time, there's no doubt about that, and looking at it through the lens of the past was enjoyable, it just isn't anything special compared to even things released right when it released. The game was outdated very quickly after it was released, and nowadays there's absolutely no reason to go back to this game. Looking through a lens can only get you so far. If you make a film with an older looking lens and edit it like it was an old 1930s movie, but it has modern cars and modern looking activities, the lens can only do so much at that point. So looking at and praising the original Super Mario Bros. For how innovative it was at the time doesn't really hold much value when the game is really nothing special today. So don't play the original Super Mario Bros. There are so many better games to play that are just like this game. Just better. For instance, the game's sequel, Super Mario Bros. 2, a hidden gem that people don't talk nearly enough about, even with its slightly clunky development. The game is still really fun. I will not be looking at that game next, however. Instead, I will be looking at the real Super Mario Bros. 2, which is hated oh so heavily.
You made it to the end. Good job. So yeah, if you couldn't tell, I'm trying something new. I'm trying new stuff. I'm getting a little wild with my videos now because I don't like doing gameplay videos. I genuinely hate editing those. Those are awful to edit. They're just boring. I have to sit through like 2 hours of them every time, and I hate it. And this was just a really quick thing that I wanted to do. It took me like 3 weeks still, but you know, it was fun. It was very fun to do, and I'm gonna be doing a lot more of these in the future. I have a schedule ready for like a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, yippee, yay, yeah.